Thank you all so much, and welcome to Community Development, Housing, General Government Committee meeting for today, Tuesday, August 13th. We are going to, again, just like yesterday, the way the visual of our agenda is now changed. It's flipped. We used to have the general at the top and the consent at the bottom, but we always have taken the consent first. So today we have 10 consent items and we have 4 general agenda items. And I am going to ask the committee and council members, are there any that you would like to see pulled? We also...
I'll just say if there's any people in the room that
are there any developers or property owners here for the houses that are on the agenda for demolition? All right. And I will entertain a motion to
approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to accept the consent agenda. All those in favor, let it be known by voting yes. All those opposed, no. And the motion passes unanimously. Will the secretary please read one of the things that we do want to do, committee, item G4. The city attorney and staff would like to pull this and go work on some other things about this to bring it to a slate. Is that okay?
Can I make a comment on it?
Yes, sir.
This
Councilmember
had to
Clark.
do with fences and front yards.
Yes.
I would read into the 7-0 unanimous ruling of the planning board to reject it as strong evidence of limited support for this ordinance.
And we thank you, Councilmember Clark, for that opinion. Again, staff is going to work on it, and they'll bring it back to this committee and for council to have feedback or input, okay?
We'll put another stake in it.
All right. City Secretary, please read.
G1, resolution adopting the Peters Creek Parkway Growth Corridor Plan, public hearing September 3rd, 2019.
All right.
All right. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Let me go over quickly what we have done on this particular project.
And would you identify yourself for the listening audience and those in attendance, please?
I'm Marco Andrade. I'm a project planner with the City County Planning Board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to give you some background information, you may know that we have finished doing the area plan updates for the entire city and county. And so last year, the Planning Board directed us to look at some design-oriented small areas to look more into refining the recommendations of the area plans. And so 3 types of plans were identified: growth corridor plans, Northern Beltway interchange plans, and strategic area plans. So this is the first corridor study that we have done and the first one that you're going to see. Just to give you a little bit of background, Legacy has defined growth corridors as the main roadways in the community. So it includes roads like, of course, Peters Creek, University Parkway, Robin Hood Road, Liberty Street, Watown. So those are main roads in the community, linking activity centers to the downtown. And they intended to be the future multimodal transportation corridors in the city and county. So through the area plans, we have looked at that, and we have identified areas for mixture of uses and concentrated development. So really what this plan is doing is looking more at the design of the Peters Creek Parkway corridor. Just to give you an idea of the boundaries, it goes from Business 40 all the way to the county line, about 6.4 miles. And we look at the properties on both sides of Peters Creek Parkway shown in blue, but we notify a larger area that's shown with the red line for people who use Peters Creek Parkway to know and to tell us what they would like to see in the future development of the corridor. So we had a good citizen participation process. We held 4 meetings from November to April last year to this year, and we really had a good participation. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Councilmember Bessie Larson and McIntosh for participating and coming to the meetings. So to make it easy for citizens, depending on where they live or their areas of interest, we divided the corridor into 3 sections, north, central, and south, and we apply a multi-part plan process to all of those 3 areas, where we look at the existing character and we develop a design strategy with the citizens and do apply those design strategies into some development sites and actually come up with some development design vision. So let me just kind of go quickly over the process. As I say, we developed the existing character, and then we presented the citizens with a large number of options for site layout, including location of the building, location of the parking, how do you access the property, how far is setback from the street, where is the main entrance, all of that. And so we asked them to select the ones that they thought were the most appropriate for the different sections of the corridor. And then with that, we asked them to look at 3 different sites. We selected those sites based upon what we have heard on the area plans, and we asked them to apply those design elements to a specific site. So they did that, and then we developed more in detail those design visions. And just to give you an example, we picked the site redevelopment on the north. It was the Winston-Salem shopping center, and what we heard was, if this is redeveloped, maybe having some buildings fronting the street, breaking up the parking, having some landscaping. So these were just reflecting what they told us for the central side. With the central section of the corridor, we picked the vacant site north of the Lowe's hardware. And again, they come up with street connector, location of the buildings, location of parking, walking trails. And then for the south, we did a site that it's across from the Oliver's Crossing, and they picked on some of the elements that they liked from that shopping center and applied them to this particular site. So these are just examples of what they did. And then we summarized the recommendations and have some guidelines in the end of the document with the intent to be served as guidelines, recommendations for future development or redevelopment along the corridor. So in terms of the next steps, of course, the planning board recommended adoption of the plan, and the county commissioners at the city council will have public hearings after this committee makes a recommendation. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Recognizing the council member from one of the sections of the Peters Creek Parkway, Councilmember Bessie.
Yes, thank you. I was reading the planning board comment and discussion minutes, and the 4th Street area, that little stub that comes down there, was referenced. The draft plan itself was not included as an attachment, so I'm just trying to locate in the plan the section that appeared to trigger people's concerns. Can you reference me to the page?
Yeah, it is on page 20.
Page 20?
And
20,
yes, there were some comments related to mixed use. So what is page 20 says is this plan recommends keeping the existing recommendation from the area plan, the South Central area plan, which is to keep this area residential in character. So the plan highlights certain things that have been of interest to people to maybe look this for a different or more intense type of use. So from the planning board perspective, they wanted to have this as a more residential, future residential, different densities, but just keep it a residential. And then it's just at the end of that page, recommendation that we're not going to be changing the land use unless we are directed by the planning board or the city council, and then a process, something like a charrette, design charrette, involving everybody that it's interested in this specific area could come and then But we're not going to be doing any of that unless we're directed.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I still cannot find the section that references that area because it's not on page 20 that I can see. Does anyone have access to? Please, would someone else like to go on?
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilmember Larson?
Thank you. Compliments to staff, a lot of public participation. Peters Creek Parkway is a very difficult corridor, and it's good that you chose one of the more difficult projects, I think, to come out of the slot with it. I think generally it's aspirational, and it certainly shows the potential to expand some commercial activity that is compatible with the neighborhoods that are on either side. And I think that was my big concern, was that the neighborhoods would not be further impacted for further development down Peters Creek. I mean, it is what it is. Some of the beautification recommendations on the median and off-ramps, whatever, are well considered. And I thank you for taking the effort. I hope that this will be a plan that we can work with and actually implement. I think there's always a problem with developers or others who simply are going to have their own way. And we can try to punch against this document and hopefully bring this beast under some control. Thank you.
Councilmember Scipio.
I love this plan. I thank you for doing it. I just need to have clarity on when we adopt these secondary plans, because they fit into already an existing area plan. They operate like an addendum to that. Is that right? So when people go to develop along Peters Creek, this would be the primary plan that they would be using to say whether it's acceptable or not.
We have the current area plans that do have specific recommendations. They went through a public participation process in terms of recommending land uses. So that will be, if it's for land uses, that will be the document that will be referred to. This is more design oriented, and how you do that. Where do you locate the building? How do you access the building? But the land use, this plan doesn't change any of the land uses that the area plans are recommending.
But it fits into those land uses.
Absolutely.
The aesthetics part and how it would be constructed to
That's
make
correct.
this come to pass. So for clarity, when we adopted the East End area plan, it is an insert into the East area plan, and it's a guide for developing.
That's correct.
Correct? So if someone comes and wants to construct something in the East End, it has to fit that plan, not our East End area. Our East area plan. Is that right?
That is correct. That is a little different than this one, but it's more specific. This is a little more general.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want to make sure.
Councilmember McIntosh.
I would just take one exception with that, and it wouldn't have to. It doesn't have to fit in. This doesn't carry the force of law. These are suggestions. Right. So somebody coming in has a good idea of what the community is going to think about this. And sometimes the community changes their mind. A good design comes along, and they can be adopted without having to to redo this. But I'm going to echo my fellow council members. Thanks to the work done here. I mean, I think these are always very valuable. Not only does it provide some protections to some of the landowners' neighborhoods around there, but it also provides somewhat of a guide to developers. Because if somebody comes in and says, where can I do multifamily housing in this, with UDO 283 in place, they've already got to look at where are some places on Peters Creek Parkway where that could work. So I think it helps from that standpoint as well. So I think it's a job well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Clark.
I just going to say, certainly Peters Creek is by far the prettiest, not the prettiest street in town. But it looks like maybe it has been developed very piecemeal in very small segments, because you'll have one building and the next one beside it's totally different. And maybe this will encourage some of the landowners to merge their land or to accumulate them such that they can do a more comprehensive plan.
Absolutely.
We'll see.
Thank you. Again, good work. And to me, it doesn't hurt ever for us to, as all of us know, to engage the citizens and the business people and possible developers in these plans, whether it's the area plan or the growth plan or the legacy plan. And I know, Councilmember Larson, yeah, we got a lot of them, but I think what we're beginning to see after my 10-plus years on the council is we're beginning to see some of these projects and ideas come to fruition. And the good thing is most of it came from the community. A lot of people would think we just vote on it, but we've done our due diligence with the community. And again, like you said, if the community wants to change it based on the law, the zoning laws, they have a right, they can do that. But I respect the planning department always for going out the extra mile to getting people to these meetings and marketing, at least so we can have some voices to everything that we do. I appreciate that, you and your staff. Councilman Bessie, back to you.
Thank you. Yes. Sorry about the confusion. The version incorporating comments through the planning process is not online and was not attached to our package, so I couldn't find the section reference. Comparing the form in which it went to hearing and the form in which it came out of the planning board, there is a difference, but I think that there is still room for concern that it could be taken as actively recommending that the existing housing in that area be included in a study that could recommend changing the use of the area. I am not comfortable endorsing the form in which that is referenced, which now reads, if the planning board or city council, the original form says, this study recommends examining this site using a dedicated process, etc. The revised version says, if the planning board or city council determine that the proposed land use recommendations for this area need to be reevaluated in the future, this plan recommends examining this site using a dedicated process, etc. The process is a good idea, but only, I would suggest, if the elected body directs that it should be reexamined. I think that even in this form, it will be taken as opening the door to encouraging the reevaluation of that section, which is sensitive for a number of areas. I'd be interested in an opportunity to confer with my colleagues whose wards touch directly on the plan, unless there is some urgency in action today. I might inquire whether it would be appropriate to carry this over to our next meeting for further discussion.
Councilmember Larson.
Yeah, I have no problem
McIntosh.
with that. This area has been contentious. Obviously, we've had two battles on this hillside. There's a housing stock there in West. The neighborhood's been very concerned about it. If it's not clear about the process or how the future of this area is going to be worked, I think we can spend some more time on that.
Councilman McIntosh.
Nothing that I heard in that would lead a developer to believe that they don't have to go through the usual public process of bringing something before. And I think there's a lot of voices that would oppose a real intensification of that area. So I don't mind pushing it off, but I don't think it leads anybody to believe it's a done deal. It's an easy thing to do.
And you may persuade me of that, but I'd like the opportunity to kick it around. My apologies for not catching the change of language in advance of the meeting, or I would have given the heads up.
This is where you catch it.
Why don't we just hold
Yeah,
it
good.
again for a moment?
Yeah, we will. Is that good? Okay, good enough. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item.
G2, resolution directing city staff to engage a marketing consultant to develop a new name for the Dixie Classic Fair.
Mr. Rao.
Good afternoon, Chairman Adams, members of the City Council. Excuse me. Back in April, a group of citizens spoke to this committee and requested that the city consider changing the name of the Dixie Classic Fair From that meeting, council requested some information about the history of the fair, the history of the name Dixie, and then also requested that staff conduct a process to receive input from the public for suggestions for a new name. And so during the month of May, the city opened up an online survey, made available their citizen feedback line, utilized our social media platforms, and then held a public input meeting at the Fairgrounds Education Building on May 7th. We received over 11,000 responses, many more from our social media platforms. In June, the Fair Planning Committee reviewed that data and expressed concern about the time frame that was being proposed to bring a suggested new name back to the council. And so they passed a resolution at that time basically saying that if the city is going to reconsider the name, that more time and more resources should be provided so that a name could be developed that would endure. The current name was created in 1956, and the feeling, I think, from that committee was we needed a name that would endure for another 50 years. So then the next step in the process was the Public Assembly Facility Commission also reviewed the data and reviewed the recommendation from the Fair Planning Committee, and at that time they felt like they needed more guidance as far as how to proceed with developing a new name. And so thus today staff is presenting a resolution requesting or asking that the mayor and the council direct staff to engage a consultant to develop a new name for the fair. That way there would be clear guidance given to the Fair Planning Committee and the Public Assembly Facilities Commission as to how we would proceed with developing a new name. So staff is in the process of developing a request for proposal document to advertise for marketing services to develop a name, very specific, very focused scope of work to just focus on developing the new name, engage in focus groups, actually attend the 2019 Dixie Classic Fair to receive input, and other ways to develop potentially 3 ideas for a name that would then be vetted by the Fair Planning Committee and the Public Assembly Facility Commission next spring, and then they would rank those ideas, and then those ideas would come before the council for consideration for selection of a new name. So that's the proposed timeline that we are looking at. The budget for this effort, we're estimating about $60,000, which is roughly what the city spent when we went through a broader rebranding effort back in the early 2000s. The funding for that will come from the fairground reserves. It will not come from tax dollars. Currently, we have a little over $2 million in fairground reserves, and we typically looked at those funds to pay for one-time needs like capital and studies such as this. So that's how we would fund this engagement with a consultant. So with that, the resolution that's before the committee today is a resolution directing staff to engage a consultant to develop a new name that would go into effect with the 2021 fair. The way our process works in terms of advertising, when the current year fair is over, we immediately begin the process of promoting the next year's fair. So the feeling is that the lead time we need to develop a new name would give us the time that then when the 2020 fair concludes, we can immediately start to promote and really build up the anticipation for unveiling the new name for the fair in 2021. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any comments or questions from this committee?
Oh, I'll let somebody else have a few.
Thank you. Councilwoman Clark.
I don't think this is like a consumer product. I'm going to come up with a new brand of wine or beer or soda, whatever. I just think we need a name to designate it. I'm a little reluctant to spend those kind of bucks for it. I am probably more interested in what it's going to cost to change it. That is, let's take a hard look at how much signage we're talking about. I do know on the back of the grandstands is a large painting. That would have to be worked. We do have a marketing budget every year. I would hope we could use that to play up the name change. But I don't think I would be in favor of spending $50,000 to $60,000. I think there's 5 or 6 names that kind of make sense. and then I think we'll just see how the 8 folks feel about it.
Councilmember Bessie.
Actually, that's pretty close to my own thinking on the matter. I want to thank staff for trying to do what we ask you to do. And I know that the Fair Planning Committee and the Public Facilities Commission, took a good faith stab at the question. But in retrospect, we probably put them on a hot seat that they didn't volunteer for, and it wasn't their job; it was our job. The impetus for changing the name is not really whether it was working as a marketing matter so much as did it have connotations that the community today reasonably objects to. And I think it's fair to conclude that the answer to that is yes. And so it falls on us to make a decision. I do not believe that given the scope of the alternatives that have already been suggested and are available, we're going to learn enough from a consultant process to justify the expense and the time. There are issues that do need deep dive studies. There are severe problems in the community that we ought to be spending limited time and resources on, and this one can be pretty open and shut. Let's just get to the decision process. So I can't support the consultant study.
Any other comments?
Well, if Dan's for it, I'm going to have to be against it because I can't agree against it on anything.
Councilmember Sippy.
I have felt that the fair renaming should not be the issue that we focus on. I'm more concerned about how residents see the city. What is the image of the city? What do we say to our friends, our families about this city? And how is this city marketed to others that bring people here to live and to work and to have a sustainable existence? I do know there are lots of efforts underway that other people are paying funds for how should this city be branded. We are not paying for that, but other institutions in our community are paying for that. The Visitor Center has already done a study about branding the city. I am not in favor of spending money just to find a name for the Dixie Classic Fair. I don't think we have too many other things we need to focus on and get right that affect people. I believe we need to start using the resources that are there, tapping into the learning that other groups in the community are learning, and let's have synergy of blending that, looking at what comes out in December, what people are saying about our community outside of the community. The fair may need to be changed because other entities don't see it fitting in the whole image that we want to have. I think we should take a step back, tap into the knowledge that's being collected, see what we learn for that. I don't see us spending $60,000, $70,000 just for this particular naming event.
Any other comments?
I'm going to save my comments for when it gets the full council,
Okay. For Monday? Okay.
if it passes here.
Okay. Again, I know that there are a lot of people that feel like nothing should be done to the name of this event. And I know a lot of people think that some of us are wrong to want the name changed. And I've had phone calls that weren't quite kind. I've had emails that weren't quite kind. But I'm okay with that because I made the choice to be an elected official born and raised in this city. And I know people don't like it when you take people back to the history of this city. I remember going to that fair where I could only go because I was colored. And it was called the Carolina Fair. And that fair came after the Dixie Classic Fair. And we didn't get all the rides and the bells and whistles and things that the Dixie Classic Fair had. Again, I always question the process. I know, Mr. Rao, you gave me the attachment of the history, but somewhere I read that name, when it was named in 1956, it wasn't done through a process. It was done because someone decided on their own that they wanted to change the name. So if people, citizens and others want to get upset because some of us want that name changed, I want to say that I want to be able to execute the same opportunities that person did in 1956. I have a right and responsibility to all of the citizens of Winston-Salem, and I think, and you know, there were people that questioned, well, I guess you just wanted to change. Yes, I do. I remember passing by there when they had all the pretty lights, and the fair I went to didn't have any lights but little white lights. I don't know what it is about us not wanting to move on and change. There are some things, yes, we can hold on to, that's history. I'm okay with that. But I don't think Dixie defines who Winston-Salem is, or the people of Winston-Salem, or our history. I will always go back to what is documented and validated and I can verify. And that is that the name was changed in 1956 with no input from the city council, no input from the community. And that is something that we have tried to do. Again, Mr. Rao, what I'm hearing from the council is that, the committee, and I don't know whether we're going to get a motion on the floor for it and it's going to go to council without anything. And I'm okay with that too, because I know where I'm going to stand. I don't mind saying it publicly. I will be supporting the change of this name to this event, whether we do it without the consultant and we go because of our responsibility to get it done. We go with the consultants that the Chamber and WISB and the Visitor Center are using to see what it is that might be keeping people from our city and might be bringing people to our city. And what can we do to make it better? So, the committee, Councilmember Bessie.
Yeah, trying to come up with a form of a motion that I think will be a consensus of committee members. I would move that we recommend that the council determine that we will move forward with the name change and that we establish a process for the council to take input and consider from among the alternatives that have already been suggested through the public input process. There are several good suggestions in that process. I have a favorite, and I'll can pitch it at the appropriate time, but not today. But I would make that motion.
Okay. Can I get a second? No second. Your motion dies. Councilmember Clark.
I think we ought to just hold in committee and ask the staff to come back with a different plan that says they will canvass they will give to the council members the names that were suggested in the 11,000 responses and poll the council informally and then come back with a recommendation. I think we're making this thing a lot harder than it needs to be.
I agree.
I'll second that motion. I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
Was that a
You're
motion?
seconding his motion?
Was that a motion? Or was that,
Well, if I get a second, it is, yeah.
Wait.
I apologize. I interrupted
Yeah.
Councilmember Scipio if she...
Is that, well, first of all,
Yeah, I
is
just
that a
think,
motion?
the staff is bringing a process, go back, tell them we want a simplified process. And publish the names and poll us, and we can you go get 8 different opinions, and you can publish the results, and then we'll vote on it accordingly. I'm kind of like, like Dan, I don't think the world's going to, the biggest thing that affects the attendance at the fair is rain.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't rain, we can have up to about 340,000 people. That's the second biggest fair in the state after the state fair. If it rains, people don't go to the fair if it's outside. So whether or not what we call it, we do need to publicize each year so people know what week it is. And we do a lot of that. It's usually around the first week of October. But I don't think people will say, wait a minute, this is the Twin City or the Winston-Salem Fair or whatever, and therefore I'm not going because I don't like the name.
Right.
They go because they like the rides, they like the animals, they like to
The
give
food.
the money, they like to give the money to the guy and get the little teddy bear and all that type of stuff.
I think we are all,
Councilmember
oh, thank
Scipio.
you. I think as a community, we're all sensitive to everybody's concerns, and we don't want to deal with things that aggravate and inflame folks. Sometimes we have to be strong enough and courageous enough to take the stand. I don't want it to stay in committee, because that means we're avoiding making a decision. I would love for us to take it to the full council to see who wants to change the name and who doesn't want it. When people refer from, Dee Dee talked about, or Councilmember Adams talked about the days when we had two fairs. We had two fairs because it was the time in our nation when there was segregation. And in that system, African Americans always got less than the majority culture. We got less. In that system, we couldn't be together. In that system, though, our fair was the Carolina Fair. We didn't say going to the Carolina Fair. When we talked to other people, they didn't say they're going to the Dixie Classic Fair. They're going to the fair. We all go to the fair. I'm not trying to deny anybody's history, but our history in America is not a wonderful history. We sometimes have to own up to that. Things that are offensive, we've tolerated it for many, many years. So I think we need to decide whether we're going to change the name. If we're going to change it, then what should it be? That's a process. But I think we're reluctant to make the decision of whether we're going to change it or not. And we have to be courageous to say whether we're going to change it or not, and let the other council members do that too.
I don't think that's what Dan and I are saying. We're saying, why are we spending $60,000 when we already got suggested names? Let's just pick one.
What is Councilmember Larson?
I get to start. I'll speak now. There are a variety of reasons to change the name of the fair. It's already been changed 6-7 times, and I recorded history. This initiative to change the name is hinged on one word, which has caused us a division and a split within our community. And the removal of the word Dixie from the Dixie Classic Fair is not going to change the presence of that word in Southern lexicon. We will continue to have the Dixie Chicks, Dixie Beer, Dixie Cups, and any number of things, Dixieland music, that will remain as part of the Southern landscape of the part of the world we're living in. That we can argue over that nomenclature. There's similarities between New England, as a region, Dixie as a region, Gold Coast. You pick a certain name, and it's embedded then in the identity of a geographical area. What we're facing with is, and I'll sort of build on Councilmember Scipio's comment, is it time for us to reinvent ourselves as a city, which we're busily doing, and to present ourselves in a new way. And if we continue to argue over a word that is not going to really make that much difference at the end of the day, we're going to continue to divide ourselves, which is, I think, incredibly destructive. I would like us to come up with some resolutions that are positive in the sense of where this city's going. If we have to get the resolution reworked a little bit, the council as a whole has not ruled yet. What this resolution does is two things. One, it says we're changing the name, which has not actually been ruled on council as a whole yet. And the second thing this resolution does, it says we're going to pay $60,000 to find somebody to come tell us what some good names are. You know, I think we're hearing loud and clear that we ought to be able to do this maybe without $60,000 expenditure. I certainly would agree to that. I hope we're capable of handling our own affairs. But I think also we need some time to sort that out. And I cannot really support the resolution as it's currently written because I think it's flawed in a variety of ways, and I'm not going to talk about that today unless this resolution goes forward to full council. And I think any discussion of this resolution is corrosive at this point. So whatever your council, whatever your committee decides to do, but I would agree that we could find a better path to walk on.
Thank you. Councilman McIntyre.
Not having been born and raised here and having been born and raised in New Jersey, I have no particular sentimental attachment to the name Dixie. I'm name agnostic. I do have a problem with the process of this. All these documents say the mayor and city council directed city staff. Well, city council did not. This committee did. And the process that this has gone through has not been good. I'm not saying that the outcome won't be a good thing, but I have real problems with the way this was done. I highly recommend that we not put the cart before the horse the next time we have a situation like this. I know people are passionate about it, but, you know, I've been getting a lot of heat for what city council has done. And I'm happy to take that heat if it's something that city council has done. But city council hasn't done it. And I know that the amount of feedback that I have gotten from people that I know live in Winston and I know live in my ward has been to not change the name. Now, you know, again, if full council decides to do that, I'm happy to go along with it. But I got problems with how this has been done, so I'm just going to leave it at that.
Any other comments? Councilman Best.
If if any of my colleagues have a suggestion for a process to move forward, I am happy to hear it. Frankly does not matter to me, and I don't think it's terribly significant whether we do the review and the recommendation of a name in committee and let the council as a whole vote up and down, or whether we ask the council as a whole to join in a decision to change the name before we undertake the process. I do not want us to spend money for a consultant to undertake a review that in the final analysis comes down to what is frankly an elected official decision here. I am comfortable voting to say I will support changing the name, whether it's done in committee or the council at this point. I'd like to see us get off the dime and move forward with one process or another, and I'm happy to hear what my colleagues would consider supporting that we can get together on.
Councilmember Clark.
I'm suggesting we hold in a committee. The staff heard what we said. We don't want to spend the $60,000. Come back with a different process. That's something we can send to the council that they can vote to change the name. And if they vote to change the name, here's the recommended name, and move on.
Councilmember Scipio.
I'm sorry. Our process of keeping things in committee is very frustrating, and nothing gets done. It's a way of delaying. It's a delaying tactic. I would love for us to take a resolution to the council on whether we change the name or not. And at that point, if it's going to be changed, have staff spend time figuring out the best way to do that. To have staff take time to figure out another process without getting the full support of the council, I believe, is a waste of using their time. and their resources. I think we need to resolve it.
Thank you. Everybody's done? Okay.
I'm not sure what we're doing, but go ahead,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
All right. Much discussion. That's what our democracy is about. And that's good. Mr. Rao, first of all, I want you to make sure you thank the Fair Committee and you thank the Facilities Committee for their work. Councilman Best is correct. We put them on the hot seat. This is a decision to me, and it always has been, that this council should make. Again, if you go back and look at the history of the process of how this event has been named, to me it would be appropriate that it comes out of this body. It's not difficult. It's either yes or no that we change the name. That's the first step. Because if the council, out of 8 people and a tie vote of a mayor, decide that they don't want to change the name, then we'll move on from that point and let the people be happy, or people will be a little upset or whatever. But what I'm asking you to do is, for me, and maybe the committee may differ from me for what I think we should do. First of all, this resolution, again, I don't think it's appropriate either. And I don't think, for me, it should be that we either change the name or not. That's the first step of the process to me. That this body has got to step up and say yes or no, whether they want to see the name change. Then you move on to the next piece of the process, which is, okay, what is it going to be? Then you get to pick and choose names. And if I'm wrong, and on that note, the committee, let me know. I think that we've kicked this can long enough. It reminds me of the signs and the trees and the parking on the lawn and everything else that we do. It's either that you're in or you're out. You either got to declare. And you can abstain, you can do what you want, but the people look for us to make a decision. Let's not get caught like those folk in those other places. Let's just make a decision for the people and for the people of this city. And if the people you represent feel as though that you should vote one way or the other, let it be. It's okay. But we got to make a decision. And so what does this committee desire?
I think we ought to hold in the committee for 1 month, have the staff take our recommendations and come back with a different motion. And the city manager.
I'm trying to clarify that, Madam Chair, do you want us to come back with just a process, or do you want me to come back? I mean, we can come back next month with a name.
Process.
Okay.
No, he's not talking about a name.
Okay.
What I want is for this body to decide, this committee or the body,
To decide if we're changing the name.
decide publicly whether they're going to change the name or not.
Okay.
And if anybody has an issue with that, then you might want to rethink what you're doing. But anyway, I think that's the way to
Yeah.
go.
And the process would include, okay, if we vote to change it, here's how we would go about coming up.
That would be the next step.
That's the next step.
You could do all that in one motion.
That would be the next step. First of all, any other committee members, because we're going in discussion.
Yeah.
Councilman Larson.
I think.
Oh, the attorney, Council,
Yeah.
city attorney. It's a two-step motion.
I just want to make sure we're all.
It's a two-step motion.
And I will be happy for $10,000 to come up with 5 names off the vote.
We can do it less than that.
Or maybe less. I might.
But are we going to go to council next Monday on the first part to just change the name
The
or not?
first part is, in city attorney, if we allow,
That'd be fine.
that we have the resolution to change the name. That's the first. And the second part B would be, or part 2 would be if they vote yes, if we vote as a body yes, or the majority, then the next motion would be, or directed to staff, is they bring us the process. Okay. How does the committee?
That's fine. And I've lowered my price to $5,000 for 5 names. I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I
Whatever.
second.
Hold out, he'll do it
Oh,
for
wait,
nothing.
wait a minute.
I'm not that sure.
Did you mash?
Yes, ma'am, I mashed the
I need a second.
I'll do, the motion is to take a resolution to council on whether or not we will change the name.
Yes.
And if it's a yes, to proceed to ask the staff to come up with a process by which we will discover
Yep.
that name.
Yeah.
I second the motion.
You got it?
Let's vote.
Okay, discussion.
Yes, I would simply make one request of the motion on whether or not we change the name, that in the process of doing that, that we not demonize the word, and that we give reasons for improving our presentation to the public at large, and get away from that one issue which seems to be so critical. I understand it's important, but we can accomplish this in a way that will pull this city back together. And I would like us not to demonize the word Dixie, because that seems to be the rock upon which this whole thing is crushing itself right now as far as this community goes. So when the resolution comes forward, you know, that we have a positive statement about why we're changing the name, or at least that we're going to change the name. And that's the problem I have with the first sentence, the first paragraph or so of the resolution as it's currently.
And Councilmember Larson, as you just heard, we're not voting basically on that.
Right. We're voting on a resolution to change the name.
Correct.
And so in the process of doing that, why we are doing that, why we are changing the name, I want to be careful about how that is presented to the public.
City Attorney.
I generally do short resolutions, so it would be to change the name or not.
Yeah.
Not really get into
Yeah.
The process.
Right.
reasons why.
I got you.
Right.
I feel the same way. It's either yes or no. Thank you.
And Madam Chairman, I would add,
City Manager.
if council votes to change the name, when we come back with a process, we won't get into why, we'll just get into, you know, what the new name is, why we recommend the new name.
And that's basically that. Councilmember Scipio, did you have a comment? Any other comments? All right.
And the answer is?
I haven't voted.
I voted.
You got to vote.
I'm sorry. Thank you. The motion passes, and we will see this in a different format in two resolutions on Monday at the council meeting. Next agenda item, please.
G3, information on the previously approved job creation and economic development agreement between the City of Winston-Salem and SG Atkins Community Development Corporation.
Who's doing this? Mr. Raleigh.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Adams and members of the committee. This item is a continuation of one that was brought before this body in May regarding, or at the request of Councilmember Scipio, there are two agreements that the city has authorized execution of. The first is an agreement between the city and SG Atkins for the use of $3 million in economic development bond funds to acquire commercially zoned properties and others as allowed by law in the area that's known as East End. The second agreement is one that's essentially the reauthorization of a 3-year agreement between the city and SG Atkins for an amount of $60,000 per year to support a real estate development position for the organization. Essentially, this position was tasked with carrying out and executing portions of the East End Master Plan. So at the May committees, there were several questions that were asked in relation to this item. Staff has prepared a memo which is attached to your item that responds to several of those questions that were asked by this committee and also members of the Finance Committee. So at this particular time, we are looking for direction from the body as it pertains to Councilmember Scipio's request to rescind the authorization that has been awarded or been granted to proceed with the execution of those two agreements.
Thank you. Any comments? This item was in Finance yesterday.
And
Yes.
we directed staff to continue to work with Scipio,
Yeah.
just and other interested parties to see what we can come to resolution.
We'll bring it back next month, yes.
Councilmember Scipio.
I do want to, I do apologize for yesterday.
You don't need to.
I
Well,
do, because I think I wasn't as prepared as I like to be, and I want Mr. Raleigh, please put that document up. I like for my council members to understand how I see the East Ward. None of you live there, and I want you to really understand the dynamics that are happening in my ward. I have a ward that is probably the most diverse in many aspects, and Evan, you're going to have to point to that because they are not going to see it. You see, my ward is pretty much in two pieces. And the dividing line there, where one side to the other is Salem Lake, is pretty much that separates the older part of the East Ward, which usually is referred to as East Winston. And then we have the other part that goes all the way out to Glenn High School. East Winston is not one location. Now, Mr. Raleigh, I don't know if you can show the East End area on that map. That's the East End area on that map. All of the other part of the historical East Winston area is what I need you to understand about. East End is in need of refurbishing, but East End area was part of the area that was demolished in 1969. What we have now is what came back over the last 50 years. The rest of the ward in the East Winston area have all kinds of neighborhoods. No attention has been given to them in the last 50 years. We have the same needs in all of those other neighborhoods as East End has. Dreamland Park, Slater Park, Reynoldstown, City View, Skyland Park, Happy Hill, Columbia Terrace is a Skyline Village area by the stadium. None of those neighborhoods have had any attention. And when I have my community meetings with those residents, they say to me, when are we going to get something? Who's looking out for us? I love that East End plan because it sets a guide for developing that East End area. The major boundary on the East End area is Wake Forest Innovation Corridor, where there is development and people are interested in developing that particular neighborhood. Made good sense to have a plan for it. It's getting the attention. The rest of my ward needs attention. Part of what I saw with this $3 million is I need you to give me $3 more million to help my other residents, those who have been ignored for 50 years. All I'm saying to the council is that development is being stimulated by that East End master plan. There are at least 4 different projects that are already coming in there. When the agency asked us about, when they talked about what they were able to do, the commercial property in that East End area that it should be targeted for that $3 million, they were saying how difficult it has been for them to procure any of it or get any kind of buy-in. All I'm asking is that that $3 million is released for use in all of that East Winston area that had not been targeted or gotten anything over the last 50 years, and it's on a first-come, first-served. It doesn't preclude it not going into the East End area, but if a developer comes and wants to do something in Dreamland Park or over in Happy Hill, it refreshes all of those neighborhoods. So I know you don't have these problems in your ward. I have them in mine. because of how that ward has been treated over time and where people live. So I'm asking to rescind that primarily because I need help in the other part of my ward. The East End is just a small part of all of that which has been neglected. Now, you know, we've talked about all of the dollars and the cents, et cetera, but I will say rescind it so that we can start doing stuff in the rest of my East Ward area, in the old East Winston area.
Thank you. Any other comments? Do we have anyone here from the Atkins CDC? Or anyone that wants to make a comment about it? Representative Montgomery, come forward, state your name and your address, please.
Durwell Montgomery, 2021 New Walkertown Road, and I live in the East Ward. To this committee, to this council, this is the only item I've ever stood back in front of you all in the last 7-8 months to talk about, give my input or my thoughts on. And I do so because of the hard work that the community as a whole put into bringing forth the East End Master Plan. And in that master plan, the conversations to the community specifically was that there was going to be an investment that followed the investment by this council and this community. A little over $100,000 was put in by the council to work with SGAC and CDC to develop the master plan. And the second stage of that development was to come in to invest into the commercial properties. The challenge is that it's very true that other areas within the East Ward needs investment. That's why we put in place the RUCA program, and we've had corridors identified in the East Ward. It's been a challenge getting some of the commercial owners to take advantage of the RUCA funds, which have been identified specifically along New Walkertown Road, from the shopping center all the way down to Jetway Shopping Center, and as well as when we think about the Turn neighborhoods, which specifically have housing funds invested in Dreamland Park, Slater Park, and Cameron, have the opportunity to take advantage of the Turn neighborhood and Turn funds. The GO bonds for economic development cannot be invested in housing. They're restricted to commercial investment and commercial use. And so the acquisition of property in the East End area was to attempt to control how development happens and to land bank that property, allowing SGAC and CDC to continue the work of developing out properties and developing up commercial property. The challenge that has happened at that time is there are plenty of people who are having conversations, but they all keep saying the same issue, which is you got to put the parcels together. The thing was to have an organization like SG Atkins do the hard work that most developers don't want to do, which is assemblage. They don't want to have to go through the problem and the process of assembling the properties. And that's why these funds were useful. And they were to be interwoven into a tapestry. The $1.7 million to be invested in housing in the East End area, I believe $3 million or $5 million for the infrastructure along 5th Street, and then the $3 million for the economic development were to go in to be able to help bring that up. And they were all necessary in order to preserve public interest in the people who live there now in the community. Over 15 meetings happened in that community, hundreds of hours of community input in terms of what would happen in that community. And to change it at this point, I think, without that same level of engagement back with the community, I think that we do a disservice to the community as a whole. And as much as I respect Councilman Recipio, we've had, and I've shared the same kind of challenges with this switch at this moment. I just simply ask that the council and the committee look at the large perspective of how much we've invested in that area, in that community, and why the council had attempted to move away from kind of this spot development and attempt to make investment that actually had larger benefit. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the committee? This is an information item. This is not, one that we'll have to deal with on Monday or anything. Any other? Councilmember Larson.
Does the CPO plan preclude the investment in the East Winston plan if a project were to be brought forward under your moving the $3 million out of that designated pocket? Does that preclude East Winston from applying for that money?
Does it
for the
preclude-
East Winston projects applying for that money.
Right now, it does.
Right.
It's all the projects, that money can only be used in the East End area
East
that
End
I
project.
showed you.
Okay. So East Winston has been precluded, everything goes to East End now.
End, yes.
But now, if we do what you're saying, as East End, is it precluded from applying for the money as well?
No,
No.
it
So-
would be open to any
So,
project
so,
in
so the
that
project
East
could still be
Winston
brought
area.
forward, and if
Yeah.
there was a project available, they would be able to. Yeah, the other question is, obviously, we've made a commitment as a council to the East End project. I mean, we just talked about an area plan for Salem, for the Parkway. This is another area plan that we've approved and committed ourselves to, and this may be addressed to the city manager. I'm not sure. What other funding are we committing, or have we committed into that East End project at this point to show that we are, in fact, as a city, committed to that?
That's it right now, I believe.
How much?
I mean, we spent the money for the
plan.
the plan, and
But
and that's
RUCA
it.
money or any other development money has not been spent in that area that we know.
Well, we've spent some housing money, and Evan can
Housing money.
a little bit of housing money with
Okay.
SG Atkins.
Okay.
Thank you.
And the RUCA money is not in the East End, as I recall.
That's right.
Okay.
That's not in the East End. It's only a few pockets
Ms. Commissioner.
within the
I guess
East Winston.
the question is whether the $3 million is the sole commitment that the city's making to that area, or
No.
do we have other things going on?
Ms. Council members, the back and forth discussion, city manager.
There are several other pots. So that area is, the commercial area is a RUCA area where East Winston Shopping Center is. We've also, it is eligible for the housing money and housing bond money as well. So there are other things that are available for the East End as well as the entire eastern part of the city,
Thank
for that matter.
The entire city, just
Yeah.
about, particularly the urban neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Councilmember Taylor, you're just now joining us. We are on the item we discussed extensively yesterday. We decided not to do the last item on the fencing, so we moved right along. Committee, again, this is just information. This is no more different than what Councilmember Clark said the decision was yesterday. It goes back to staff, and they work with the council member of the ward and to bring back any
And I will-
additions.
I will-
Councilmember Clark?
I will contact some folks and talk about, because I need to learn an awful lot about this. This is certainly not a
Okay. Any other comments of the day, questions? All right.